Hi, I'm Riley Moynes, author of The 4 Phases of Retirement and its sequel, The 10 Lessons. We're speaking with people who are squeezing all the juice out of their retirement. People with widely divergent backgrounds, experience, and expertise. People with stories that can inspire and encourage you too to squeeze all the juice out of your retirement. Thanks for joining us for today's conversation. Here we go. My guest today is Jim Bartl. Jim is a native of Minneapolis-St. Paul area of Minnesota. He now divides his time between that area in the summer and Southwest Florida in the winter. Jim is a lawyer who spent the majority of his career with Presto Industries, a large public firm that designs, manufactures, and markets small household appliances, as well as 40-millimeter rounds of ammunition for the U.S. Army. Originally hired on as corporate general counsel, he ultimately became executive vice president and a member of the board. But as normally we do in this series, we want to chat more about Jim's post-career activities. So Jim, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Riley. It's an absolutely delightful event to be here and participate. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jim is a neighbor in our Florida community where we both spend time in the winter, and it's your activities there, Jim, that I'd like to start with today. You have been involved with the tennis club in Spring Run, and you served, I think, as president of that for a period of time. And I know that during your time as president, you were able to make some significant improvements in the tennis courts. So tell us about your time there and your involvement and what happened.
Okay. Well, historically, I've always been an advocate and fan of tennis, and I've also played. Sometimes not very well, but it's been a very enjoyable sport. So when coming to Southwest Florida in the Spring Run where we are, I got involved playing tennis and met some very good people, interesting folks. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems we had is that our courts were getting to the point that they were deteriorating, and the kind of substance or material on the courts was kind of a rug type material that came out of a company in Australia that was supposed to have a lifetime guarantee, but it did not. And in most courts in Southwest Florida are of a what you would call a clay or a clay variety. It's really a built-up court with moisture underneath and then materials on top of that, and that is more readily susceptible to weathering the hot temperatures, the humidity, the rain, etc. And our courts have never had that, and so we undertook looking at what we would do to improve that, and had a great team that I had a chance to work with. And as we looked around, it became quite apparent that we would want to go the conventional route, and that was best interest for the community and our overall association, because it would provide long-term utilization, safer use for the tennis players, easier on the knees, and yet very competitive. And so as we started to explore that, we recognized it was going to be a significant capital improvement. And as you may well be familiar, and the listeners, it's always difficult to come up with capital funds when they are needed. So we began a process of first assessing, okay, what did we want and what would be the ideal situation? And once we formulated that and knew what we wanted, visited other facilities, talked to the people that installed it, that maintained it, etc., we started to accumulate and put together our cost package. And then the next step was we need to do some talking to our board of directors and get them on board. Fortunately, we had one or two of those that were very interested in tennis as well and had played tennis, recognized the reality of it. And we also had a couple of instances where people had taken some falls on the court, no severe injuries, but it made people sit up and take notice that, hey, we have to do something about them. So that helped us, but we had to provide some significant data to the board, respond to a number of questions, go through a series of meetings, and after a long, arduous process, we were able to get the board to agree in the community to allot roughly $300,000 for new courts, improved lighting, some additional things that would add to the benefits of the facility, but all in all, bring our tennis facility up to what we would call standard for the area.
What was the time frame? How long did it take from start to end of this one?
This was probably a 1.5 to 2 year process by the time you look at all the information we gathered, visiting other facilities, getting information on the various types of court construction, what have you, and then going through the process of getting approvals of funding and the actual implementation of the changes, which were done during the summer months when there is not as much activity here as there would during the winter months.
What was the most challenging part of the whole project?
I think two things. One is developing a core group of our committee that was very workable and we could move forward with the things that we needed to do and not have to be sidetracked with things that were somewhat miscellaneous. And then the second biggest obstacle was convincing the board and the community that this was genuinely something needed for the community and would be an asset that would inure to the overall attraction of the community to those on the outside, as well as the owners and users of it during the season.
Once having completed that one, you got involved with the strategic planning committee that sets for Spring Run a 5-year plan. And you chaired that committee and made some significant impacts on the community as a result of your work there, Jim.
Well, again, Riley, if I can go back and I can point the finger at you, because going back many years ago, you headed up such a group, and I was involved in that, and I learned a great deal in that process. Then subsequently, there became a time for another 5-year plan, and I was involved in some of the planning at that time, and I kind of got talked into chairing the committee, but I ended up, again, with really a great group of people who all worked together very well. We had from all walks of lives, male, female, a variety of ages, some who had been in the community a long time, some who had been here a shorter time, and everyone worked well together. And so it was an interesting process because as you go through this, you're effectively building a roadmap, if you would, for the community to follow during the next 5 years. And you hope when you finish that the board will approve it and then they'll go forward with it. But in the process, you go through a variety of things that you have to assess, but also pick up information. I mean, first of all, you need to get input from the community, from the owners, because it is their community and you want to do what they want. Input from the board of directors, input from the administrative staff, input from people in supervisory capacities, so we would hear from people at all levels. And then we also went to the outside and had a group of realtors that came in and were kind of a round table for us to get their input. And we went out to get the community's input, and there are a variety of ways you can do that. This time we used a letter that asked a series of questions that we asked them to respond to, and we got a very good response from that and some real good information. And then we also went out to our consultants that we use in the area of really our accountants, because they do a lot of data gathering and statistical information on what other clubs have done and are doing. And so we went to their data bank and used some of that information as well. So when we got done, we had a great deal of information from a variety of sources, but primarily focusing on what the owners in the community really wanted. And then we also had some open listening sessions. So members of the community who may not have participated in our survey information had an opportunity to come out, talk, and give us their opinions. So once we had all this data, it was a matter of, okay, we put it together, how do we categorize it, how do we focus in on that, and then once we put it into categories, how do we then select those things that seem to be most important? And we went to our data gathering again, where we could identify from the community how many people were in a particular area saying this, that, or another thing. And from there, that helped to prioritize what we were going to do.
Right. Now, what do you consider, Jim, to have been kind of the most successful aspects of putting together that plan in terms of results that you were able to achieve?
I think the biggest accomplishment was when we were able to boil it down into a concise plan and putting it together so that it would make sense, was factually sound, was something that was based on reality and not pie in the sky, so to speak, and something that would be in the best interests of the community. That aspect of it, and then the second part of that was going to the board and having several sessions with them, not only first giving them the plan, but then taking them through, though they knew some of the processes we were following, to take them through to let them know of where all the input came from, the thousands of comments that we had, etc., so that they recognized what went into this and that it was something that was based on sound, hard facts.
Makes them easier to adopt.
Yes, it does.
Right.
You kind of help make them part of the process,
Right.
so to speak.
So in terms of some specific recommendations that you might have included in your 5-year plan, can you give us some examples of some of the things that were implemented or have been implemented or are committed to be implemented?
Sure. As you go through these plans, you sometimes never know whether they are going to be, number one, approved by the board, and number two, are they implementable? Mm-hmm. So we had 3 or 4 things that were really of prime importance. One was parking. We've always had a problem of parking because we don't have a large enough area with respect to all the activities going on in a clubhouse area. Mm-hmm. And we had a number of comments for that, but we recognize that that was a political issue as well as a landlocked issue, which we have in our community. And we were not sure whether there would be anything that could really be achieved there other than some of the things we're doing now. So that was one that was it was probably one of the most highly identified items in the materials that we gathered during our process. But another one was our entry area. Our community is about 20 years old, and it was put together by a developer, and the entry area was a bit worn and tattered just from the fact that time had gone by. And on the other hand, though, that's the first thing someone who is coming into the community from the outside, whether as a prospective renter or a prospective owner, is going to say, hey, that hits my eye and that really is pleasing to me, and we had fallen behind. So that is one of the other primary areas that is currently in the process, and we expect that that may well be completed sometime during this next summer, but it has taken time to put together all of the kinds of aspects that are needed. I might throw out one other thing that was a kind of hidden benefit to the community. You take it for granted. We're a golf and tennis community. and primarily golf. We have our own 18-hole golf course, and the maintenance of that course and the care of it is critical. And our maintenance facility had become outdated and old and needed vast improvement. In going through it, it would just kind of make you shake your head and say, how are we able to do what we're doing with the kind of facilities? We had the equipment, but the facilities in which the equipment was housed, where it was maintained, repaired, etc., was extremely lacking. So one of the other things we had was to update, improve, and renovate our maintenance facility, including offices, including lunch rooms for the employees, the office space, etc., and even a segment that we could air condition that could be utilized to a greater degree during the hot summer months for repair and maintaining equipment. And that was a significant investment that was being done in 2 phases. The first phase is completed. The second phase will be completed here within the next 30 to 60 days, and it's really a remarkable improvement and benefit, because that goes to the heart of maintaining the golf course facility, which is the biggest aspect of the community from a utility standpoint.
And that's got to be very gratifying for you as someone who has kind of seen this through over what seems to be an extended period of time now, to see these things actually coming to completion.
Well, it is. You kind of live through it as you are developing that, and then you're never sure what's going to happen with it. And when they do reach fruition, it's really, I think, satisfying to everybody. Our entire committee, I think, feels that way.
Sure. Now, in addition to your heavy and long-term involvement here in Spring Run, back in Wisconsin, I know, Jim, that you're involved in a fundraising campaign for a local symphony foundation. What's involved with that for you?
Well, first of all, I'm not necessarily a musical, talented person, but I have always enjoyed symphonic music, pop concert music, and vocal music. And I became interested several years ago and joined the board of the local symphony. And after going through that for a period of time and serving in various positions, I then, with a group of 3 other individuals, we talked about our foundation, which was relatively small, and we wanted to build that foundation and get it to $1 million. And we said to ourselves, that's a doable task. So we went to the foundation board, and we went to the symphony board, suggested this, and said, hey, we'll take this on and see what we can do with it. And we did. We got a number of people involved with it, and we came up with a concept that we needed something to sell. And the concept that was developed with some folks who had some real skills in fundraising was, let us talk about selling or funding endowed orchestra chairs of particular instruments. That is something people really focused on. And they said, hey, this is something really neat. I can endow a chair, and that'll effectively pay for the cost of a musician each year, and that will be a perpetuating chair. So each year, the earnings from that particular chair funding will continue to fund that particular piece of musical accomplishment, or that particular musician. So that is what we were able to start doing, and we're getting close to our goal. We're going to go public soon. We've been in our so-called private or quiet phase, but we have raised between $300,000 and $400,000 just in that phase. We're making good progress, and I appreciate this is a small thing when you talk about the millions upon millions of dollars that are out there today and people invest in. But for this, it's kind of a regional symphony, and we're doing very, very well with it. And the orchestra, which is made up of about 60 musicians, some very talented folks do one heck of a job, and it's been a real satisfying thing to move into it. Especially, we had the chance, this is the second year that we're now having our symphony perform in a new $45 million performance center. And it's just a delight to see this thing taking hold as we have a facility like that to perform in.
Jim, when you retired, did you have this kind of community involvement planned or in the back of your head, or have these things just kind of emerged as you've become involved or as you've been immersed in your retirement?
I think it's kind of something that's evolved over time. I don't know how most people do it when they retire. You think about, oh, I want to do the things I haven't had a chance to do. I want to play more tennis, play more golf. I want to bike. I want to walk. I want to travel. But you quickly realize that if you didn't realize this before, your mind and your body are fantastic instruments. And you don't want to let either one of those end up being inactive. And I think my own personal view is I found that keeping your mind active helps to keep your body active and keeps you young, keeps you, maintains your vitality, and keeps things going. And it's interesting because when we are in Southwest Florida, we are mainly involved with people who are our age. And you don't look upon yourself as being old. When we go back north and we suddenly are going to a club or someplace and people point their finger at, who are those old folks over there? We didn't consider ourselves old when we were in Southwest Florida. It's only when we go back north. But it is kind of how the system works and how things evolved, and that's all part of being, if you want to say, juiced up or exercised about being able to be active and doing things in retirement.
And Jimmy, you're making big contributions in communities both here and back home. How do you find that kind of involvement meaningful, and what frankly do you get out of it? What's in it for you to put all this time and all this effort into these ventures?
I don't know that there is a specific thing that one really gets out of it, other than if you are truly involved and dedicated to a particular task or organization, whether it might be tennis or it might be music or it might be something else, you just kind of maybe get attracted and say, you know, I really think this is a good purpose and this is a great thing. And so we need to do this, that, or another thing. And if you can use what talents you have and the talents of others, and I've met some great people in the process, people who I didn't know before, but have found, hey, these folks really know what they're doing, and you can work together as a team and accomplish some things, and you get the satisfaction out of knowing that, hey, this is good for the organization, it's good for the community, some people are going to benefit from it, and yeah, if you have a little ego yet, just say, and I'm satisfied this all turned out that way, it was a nice accomplishment.
Sure, yeah, you made a difference.
Yes,
You made a
yes.
difference. Now, when you hear the term squeezing the juice, and you've used the term here already, what does that mean to you? What significance does that phrase hold for you?
Well, if you would have asked me that before I retired, I don't know if I would have had an answer. But now that I've been retired for a few years, I've recognized, as I've alluded to before, that if you can keep your mind active, you can keep your body active, if you can stay involved, you're part of whatever you're doing. And that just generates more life, more excitement, opens up other opportunities for you, certainly to meet other people, but to have new experiences. And all of that is part of life. And as you get into retirement, you kind of look upon, oh, during my career and whatever I may have been involved in, whatever my occupation was, you had various plateaus, various things that you were trying to accomplish, and you move it along. Now you retire and you think, hey, is this the last chapter? And what are the new plateaus? What are the new challenges? And I think some of these things of staying active, being involved, become the replacements for those things that you did and maybe you thrived on and enjoyed during your working life, and you're still making a contribution and benefiting someone.
So what's in the future for you? What plans do you have going forward, Jim?
Well, it's from a planning standpoint, I've kind of let things kind of take their own direction, and I followed them. I am going to, because of some of my past experience, I've offered to be involved in giving some input to some of the committees that are going to be doing some of the things I did in the past. Not from the standpoint of my being involved. I'm a firm believer that once you've kind of served your time in the barrel, you need to get some fresh blood and to get some new people involved. But I'm happy to share with those folks what we did and some of the issues we had to deal with so that they might be guided and use that for their own benefit. So there is that aspect of it. I still expect to do things in the communities in which we live, because those communities are great communities. They are great things for people, and you'd like to see that perpetuated and continued. Another thing that I've tried to do over the past several years, we have 8 grandchildren. And I'm a big believer, as is my spouse, in education. And so with the grandchildren, as they've reached a certain age, I have looked around and identified a couple of books on economics, but the value of money, managing money, very practical things. And as they reach a certain age, given them those books and ask them to read, they're very simple reading, and then ask them after they've read, let's sit down and talk about it and see what you've picked up from that.
Right.
Because I find in today's world, many of the young people have a lot of things given to them, and they don't often appreciate the dollars that are attached to being able to accomplish or provide those kinds of things. And so to getting some satisfaction out of that with the grandkids is something that I look forward to continuing to do.
Jim, you have certainly made a difference in this community. I know that for sure, and I want to thank you for spending time here today and sharing those experiences with other folks. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Riley. Really appreciate it.
I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and that you'll join us again next time as we help you squeeze all the juice out of retirement. I'm Riley Moynes. Bye for now.